Last time on Zero to Hero, our boy Syl is working through Path of Fire. Can he complete this journey and get to work towards his griffin? With recent news, his morale is at an all-time low. Will he ever recover? Find out that and much more on this episode of Zero to Hero. So last time we were just starting our journey on Path of Fire, and up to this point we had the Springer and the Raptor, which was already given to us by End of Dragons, so we had essentially no progress towards the account. I was able to actually finish Path of Fire and get started on the Griffin collection with the Strange Feather drop, so I decided to blow all of my remaining Astral Acclaim on the Griffin skin out of the Wizard's Vault, which I kind of regret since I could have finished Ascended Armor right away, but whatever. Ideally, I'll be able to knock out the Griffin collection quickly and move on to the Roller Beetle story, which I believe is part of the Long Live the Lich storyline in Season 4, which is actually a pretty fun storyline, even if Corona is one of the worst map releases that they've had in the past. Realistically, the series is going to slow down a little bit with the new story drop. I will be playing through that both on my main account and the alt account to finally complete Soto. And to be completely honest, I'm not looking forward to it. I'm pretty burned out and disappointed with Soto. I am tired of the daily and weekly rifts as the achievements for the weekly Astral Acclaim Wizard's Vault stuff, and I hope that this is one of the things that ArenaNet moves away from. This kind of changed my perception seeing it released and how it was implemented as opposed to a few months back when we got all the information on Soto and my hopes were really high, and I'm not sure that they really delivered on what they intended. Before I get into that, let me say that this is the last call for the entries on the giveaway. To enter the giveaway, go watch Zero to Hero episode 7, and I will be pulling the winners off of that comment section later this week. So getting back to Soto, what I was trying to say is that we knew what was coming with the release: legendary armor, weapon mastery, new weapons, and we can guess what is coming tomorrow with the new update. So I'll use this episode to share my thoughts on Soto as an entire release, even if the final act hasn't been released yet, giving some predictions and thoughts on the first of the mini X packs as they have been deemed. Despite these thoughts, I'll let you know I am fully capable of enjoying the game and being disappointed with the game at the same time. And this isn't an "oh, I'm gonna quit" rant, but I will not be pulling punches or shilling for ArenaNet. I still love the game, but let's be honest. So I guess let's get started with the story. For the most part, story was mid at best. I think that the Cryptis as an enemy are alright. However, the reused assets, even though there was work on reskinning them, made them feel really unoriginal and no different than fighting any other enemy in the game that we've been fighting for the last 10 years. The first map, Skywatch Archipelago, is the best of the three, and it's not even close. I think the most work or attention went into that, while Amnitas felt like overly large and boring and a pain to navigate for somebody without all of the masteries unlocked. And lastly, Internios, the Realm of Dreams, so to speak, felt pretty bad. While I assumed it would have been similar to the Realm of Torment in Guild Wars 1, which admittedly had the dingy gray-brown color smattered over everything, those areas had gaping holes and unique environments, and they did incorporate some of those things, but I feel like there is entirely way too much grayscale everywhere, and it just feels like there's nothing to do. As for the rewards, outside of the new expansion gimmicks, and by that I mean stuff that is only valuable right when the new expansion comes out, like Cryptis motivations or essences if you are working towards legendary armor, almost nothing this expansion offers is valuable for veteran players. With our last expansion being End of Dragons, we got a full set of legendaries with staggered variant weapons, and while Gael Adel was not very good, I feel like at least the first half of the map had significantly more flavor than the update releases of Internios. It felt like all three Internios maps were just the tunnel over and over again in terms of boredom, in terms of replayability. This is why you see so many creators and myself just not interacting with these at all. There is no reason to interact with them. Circling back to the legendary armor, something that is a considerable grind regardless of the route you choose to take, the truth is now we have 4 ways to get them, with the Soto method being by far the most repetitive and mundane. This is mirrored by a technique that ArenaNet used back in the Heart of Thorns in Season 3 era, where the first 3 legendaries and then later Chupa and Kumquat had some kind of storyline attached to the collection, and then following that, the rest of the legendaries just had a massive material grind associated with their craft. ANET had an opportunity to include the material grind in some kind of meaningful story, perhaps a 6 separate collections awarding the precursor armor or even the legendary armor in steps. So you do a collection for the helmet, you do a collection for the shoulders, and then those collections could have included some number of rifts, some number of convergences, some number of whatever, and they could have removed that triple tier rift essence from the equation altogether. The problem is that with legendaries being tied to the material grind game, you end up playing a spreadsheet simulator or the Guild Wars 2 efficiency game instead of playing Guild Wars 2. And I couldn't tell you how many materials were needed. Since I already had all 3 sets of legendary armor for a long time, the only reason I would have created it was for the skins. And as for the skins, the tier 2 skin was released with the recent news, and assuming there will be a tier 3 or some kind of variation skin coming, this current armor skin, in my opinion, looks bad. The draw effects are identical across all 3 weights. They have some glowing, which I assume is dyeable, and they don't even really look as good as the Mist Shard armor or Elegy armor from Season 4 and Icebrood Saga. I know that some people will say that they prefer it, but for me, I would never make these just for the skins alone at this point. I already talked about the weapons a little bit in other videos. The summary is that most of them are shoehorned in. Some of them make builds barely viable, while others just make builds better. All in all, it doesn't really matter because they can balance the game however they want. More weapons are better. It opens the game up a little bit, but it also opens the game up to more balance problems overall. The relic system and the legendary relic did add a decent way to add new build viability and versatility, but I have 2 things to say about it. Newer or casual players that couldn't complete a legendary rune before the deadline got completely screwed, and veteran players with 7 runes got yet another update with nothing new to do. Myself, I already had the best in slot relic for each build that I played by the time the legendary relic was released, and not having any kind of legendary journey attached to the relic left me with another patch with no content to complete. For newer players who had a endgame goal now were met with yet another giant material grind, so back to the Guild Wars 2 efficiency game instead of Guild Wars 2. And like, I get that ArenaNet is working hard to introduce material sinks into the game, which is fine, but like, tie it to a collection chain like Ascension, Ad Infinitum, Nevermore, Hope, and many of the tier 1 precursor storylines. If you do decide to craft a tier 1 precursor, they have storylines associated with it. They have material grinds associated to it, and I have to admit that it feels like they either got lazy or the devs that introduced those methods of legendary crafting left the company like 5 years ago. Just another note that screws over new or casual players is a lot of these relics are very expensive. So if you don't have the time to grind for the legendary, if you don't have the time to grind for the legendary relic, and you don't really have time to grind for gold, you end up just playing suboptimal builds all the time. In terms of repeatable, pseudo-profitable content, we got 2 things: the Fractal, the Lost Tower, and convergences with a convergence CM. I've done maybe 5 or 6 convergences total, and the time investment to profit is almost not worth it, especially in a loosely coordinated team. Perhaps the convergence CM will be more rewarding, however, it all depends. I feel like that content will likely end up directly next to Dragon Response missions in terms of long-term replayability. For the fractals are something very near and dear to my heart as your resident fractal god. I think that sticking with the Soto backstory in a direct confrontation as advertised feels really bad. I don't really care about Mabon's backstory because I know that he dies 5 minutes in to the Soto story. I don't really care about E-Park because he is going to die in an open world meta event. I just hope that the CM is interesting and fast-paced. It has mechanics that don't involve special action keys or client-sided mechanics. If the sweats want to figure out ways to solo or two-man the fight, let them do it. That's part of the fun of the game. But I will be doing all the achievements, unlocking hopefully a cool infusion, a title at the end, and once the CM comes out, I'll be enjoying that. But I wish they would have chosen a different story to tell. Fractals are full of these little snapshots of the story, like the Char Siege of Ascalon, Palawajoko using the Awakened to fight Amala in Nightfall, or little sized stories like Siren's Reef or Sunqua Peak. And they could have just said, yo, nobody cares about the Soto story, and gave us some story about Abaddon or the other gods, or they could rework Guild Wars 1 quest lines into Fractals, like some Guild Wars 1 Underworld or Fisher of Woe event chains, or even Domain of Anguish stuff. But they chose to do something else. I just feel like continuing with the Soto story was disappointing, but at least it is new content, and I'll save my final judgment on the Fractal until it's actually out and I've played it. In terms of open world replayable content, the meta events and so on, I feel like Icebrood Saga is better by far, with Gronkmar Valley, Drizzlewood Coast, Biora Marches as their 3 primary maps, in addition to a uniform reward currency of eternal ice that can be then effectively translated into whatever materials you need, or gold. In repeatable content design, IBS is significantly better as far as a retrospective is concerned. And with that, I will step off my soapbox for a minute and get back into my comfort zone, being last week's questions and the comments section. But first, let me ask you some questions this week. The first question is, what is your favorite part of Soto? I know that I just went on my little rant, but there are always some good things even in mediocre releases. What do you feel like Soto's biggest highlight was? And this will actually force me to say something good about the expansion next week. So if you want the bloomer side of the argument, I will try to waft away all of the rain clouds over my head when it comes to Soto. The second question is, what other games do you play? Believe it or not, I do play other games, and I do have an eye on some games that are coming out. So while I have no intention of stopping the Guild Wars 2 content or playing Guild Wars 2 in general, this game does highlight the play and put down style of gamer. So if you do play other games, I would like to hear about what games you enjoy, and I will share with you some of my favorite comfort games that I play when I am getting burned out with this game. My thoughts on last week's questions. For the first one, I asked you what were your favorite armor skins, and I think that the armor skins look great as a whole are things like the Grasping Dead armor from the Ara dungeon chain. I really like a lot of tier 3 cultural armors for a lot of different weights, and I think they are some of the best skins in the game that fit the character's aesthetics really well. I've been in love with the Sylvari tier 3 heavy and medium armor on all of my salads. As for the anyone can wear sets, I think that there are quite a few good ones outside of the gem store. I think Carapace armor from the Silver Waste always comes to mind as a set that looks good on every weight. Bladed armor, and there are a hodgepodge of other pieces that fit together nicely. I don't really take fashion too seriously, but one thing that does get me about the fashion in this game is that some armors using the same kind of dye channels, as far as like this is a piece of metal or a piece of leather, sometimes they don't dye the same color, and that really bothers me. So I tend to stick with sets that do dye pretty closely. Similarly, with question 2, I asked about cosmetic infusions, and I mentioned that I like the more subtle infusion effects. I do think, in all honesty, that infusions, the cosmetic ones, need to be added to a novelties panel, and while they should reward a cosmetic unlock, they can then be used as your standard +5, +9 infusion otherwise. I get that these items are rare drops or whatever, but nothing really stops you from transferring them between characters with the infusion extraction device from Fractals, so there's no real reason for them to be locked behind a particular character. There should really be some kind of UI interface that allows you to add these effects to your character and easily stack or unstack them. I think that would be a good quality of life feature altogether. So that way, if you're like me and you like collecting infusions, you can use them on whatever character you want. All right, time for some comments from you guys. First things first, Spaghettosaurus. I asked why I don't just do EOD strike CMs, and frankly, it's just about the LFG. I actually responded to this person saying that I'd run with him if he was on at the same time in the morning after after I got the build set up, but honestly, it's about availability in LFG. If you play on North America during my playtimes, I'm definitely not against playing with you guys. And once we get into the endgame repeatable content side of this playthrough, as far as getting there, I will be more willing to group up with viewers or whoever. But as far as getting to that point goes, I really don't want to do anything that normal people or a normal player wouldn't do. Secondly, for some armor types that people do like, Dio likes Magitech armor, which is pretty cool, and it's from the gem store. I don't mind gem store armor skins, but I definitely think you should try to get them from either weekly key farms and the little black lion statuettes, or gold to gems if you collect gold. My man Steve does like the Decades armor, which is one of my favorites too, because I do really like the mix and match weights. It's really hard to make a decent tank mesmer like look like a tank, like they're wearing heavy armor. So I think the Decades armor was awesome. I feel like it would be a little bit better if there was a little higher resolution on it, maybe a little bit more detail, but I think it looks good. Meow rocks a mix and match look, which I don't think I have all of these skins that you listed, but I can imagine it's like a punk rock or emo look overall, and that's kind of cool. Osiris commented about a imaginary X pack that is unreleased, and he was saying that he hopes that they would release a entirely story focused and well polished story that was feature light, which I think I can work with as long as it has repeatable, profitable content. At some point, we're going to run out of weapons or relics or useful features to add, and I think that the main problem that ArenaNet did is that they do like kind of a crappy feature update and a crappy story update, so you just end up with nothing. I mentioned that I would really like just a feature update, like, hey, here's an expansion, it's just a bunch of new features. You maybe get like one map, one polished, nice map, and that's it. But I think it could work the other way around too, where if they just had a great polished story and just stuck with that and focused on that, it could be really good. With that, I want to thank everybody who wrote a comment. Those of you who are watching this with your morning coffee or on your drive into work, I hope you are excited for something new coming out with tomorrow's update. Though I should warn you that you should probably keep your expectations in check. I hope you all have a great week ahead of you, both in and out of game, and thank you all for watching, and a special thanks to all my subscribers. And I'm going to try to get a second video out this week sometime, so keep your eyes on YouTube. If I don't get enough playtime in this week's 0 to Hero, I will still release a different video this following Monday with a similar podcast-esque style, talking about some different topics. If you have any topics you would like me to cover, drop them in the comments. Thanks again for watching. Check out episode 7 if you haven't entered the giveaway yet, and I will see you on episode 10. Peace.